So this week on Team Futurism, we are going to be discussing the great cultural divide between urban and rural folks in America. And I think that this is pertinent to, the general topic of futurism that we do like to kind of like hang on to, just because I don't know, small towns are a part of America too, and they're a part of the whole thing that we're trying to push forward with modern society. That they are part of modern society, and they consider themselves part of modern society. Curiously enough, having come from a small town, several small towns myself, I never thought oh, I live in a small town, so I'm not part of the modern age. You know what I mean? I always had the latest shit. I played, Mario Kart and Donkey Kong when I was a kid on the N64. I had whatever was happening technology-wise or whatever. It was part of my life. Granted, 12 years old or whatever. But there's this real divide where people who live in small towns are 10 years behind us culturally at some level, right? That's what I kind of want to talk about today. Right? Maybe they are living in the 1950s at some level, but I want to talk about this today because you just got back from living in Montana the last few months. You are now back in ultra hip, ultra modern Berkeley, California. Yeah.
Smell that? You smell that? It's
on the video, I totally don't smell it, but I know it, man. That Pacific Ocean breeze.
Dude, the ground is wet with liberal tears here.
The liberal tears just soaking in. They just kind of pile up on your pores.
Dude, I use them to moisturize my face when I'm here in California, man.
That's why you're so beautiful. It's glowing, man.
Yeah, bro.
Hey, so give us a little insight into why you were in Montana, for one, because it's interesting, and two, I want to get into the people you met, and their thoughts and and all of that. So what were you doing up in Montana at the last 3 months? Long time.
Yeah. 4 months actually.
4 months.
Time. Yeah. So I helped my mom start a business about 4 years ago, doing herbal teas, which I never thought would take off in the heartland of America, because it's definitely it feels like it's been branded as a hippie experiment, a pseudo health hippie experiment. But I just was sending my mom nice teas to try to get her, into a more healthful physical situation for herself. And then she ended up she was like, all my friends love these, can you send me more? And I was like, how much do they love them? How many people love them? I was like, enough that you might be able to, I don't know, charge them. She's like, yeah, sure. So it took about a year, helped her start that business up, helped her get everything up and running off the ground. It kind of took off.
Did she have a brick and mortar at that point?
No, it was just out of her home. She was just packing and selling teas out of her home. And it kind of tripped me out how much people latched onto it. But it's crazy because herbal medicine, it works, especially if you've never had it before. It's it's something usually, you can feel it affecting you at least most of the time. Anyways, that business was doing really well. So she got the opportunity to get a storefront on Main Street in this little town called Ennis, Montana. And I am a carpenter, so I went out there and I built out the inside of that business for her, and I kind of helped her also get her business off the ground, get her suppliers, blah, 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 right? So I was out there the first time for a couple of months, maybe 3 months, helping her build her spot. Then the place that she has is 3 units, so 2 of them were empty and the rent was cheap. And my hustler brain was just a little fucking rat on a wheel, dude. Just cheap rent, start a business. And so we hatched a plot to start a waffle and coffee shop, because we already had an espresso machine that was given to us with the place. My mom wasn't using it. I had to do a bunch. I'd basically rebuild it, but whatever. And so we found these. Oh man, this is gonna be a dark tale. we found this waffle machine, and it made waffles, but they're waffles on a stick. Okay, bookmark that, because we're gonna come back around to that. a little foreshadowing. And so we went out there, Karen and I, my partner and I, we built out a coffee and waffle shop on the inside. Ran it for about a month. We ran into a bunch of problems. This was last year. Ran into a bunch of problems with code in the building. We had to do a bunch of construction, had to get permits for stuff, had to get people move a little slow out there. Some people are real unreliable. Some people are reliable, but there's a couple of really unreliable contractors out there. We happen to get them. So it took us a while. We didn't get up. P.S. You don't fucking need to pass a test to be a contractor in Montana. You just pay a fee. So.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, there's no test.
Okay. All right.
A little too libertarian on that one for me. But so we ran it for about a month, made a couple grand, nothing really much, a lot of blood, sweat, and tears. So we came back this year, and we had the full year to run the joint, but it didn't do well. And part of it was the flooding in Yellowstone. Part of it was the weather there. A huge part of it was gas prices, because most people that are making it that far north are driving from multiple states over. So it didn't really do that well. But then, man, the thing that really drove me fucking nuts was that it was all boomers. The only people that could afford to travel this year were boomers, because they got like savings, or like they're retired or whatever, like they're still going to take their like yearly trip. So it was like middle to upper income boomers were the only people that were traveling. And let me just tell you, the concept of a waffle on a stick is so fucking mind-bending to people over 60. Dude, it's like handing them a Rubik's Cube from space, dude.
Did you have to like explain it? Like,
yes, so many times every day. And it's crazy because like
that's hilarious.
Every time somebody asks me, because there's a lot of like performative masculinity out there, you know what I'm saying? So you get the old, so what's a waffle on a stick?
Right.
You know what I'm saying? And I'm just thinking, I'm like, bro, there's zero ways for me to explain this to you where I don't sound like an asshole and you don't feel stupid. You
right.
know what
right.
I'm saying? Because like,
it's a waffle on a stick.
I kind of try to walk them through it a little bit more, but there isn't. There's two steps. It's a fucking waffle on a stick. You know what I'm saying? Which drove me insane, man. It drove me absolutely insane. And then we had like a focus too with the restaurant. Like for me, like I won't serve people food that I won't eat. And I make sure that everything that I eat, I know where it comes from. People don't really fucking care about that there. Tourists might care about that, but the people there don't really give a shit about that. They want food that they can recognize and is delicious and is cheap. All three. If two of the three are there, it doesn't matter. You know what I'm saying? So we had these waffles and they were like $7, $6-7 for a waffle, but you made it fresh. The batter's fresh every day, cooked it up fresh for you, came with real maple syrup, warm melted butter, pastured eggs, all that shit. Everything was like organic that it could have been. Everything that was in the food came from Montana for the most part, maybe with the exception of one thing. And yeah, man, I mean, it was a trip, it was very interesting being in the service industry again. I hadn't been in the service industry for more than 10 years. And dealing with people is interesting. You get a good, although to the point, to bring us back around to a point, the being in the service industry in a place like that gives you a really, really broad cross section of people. Because it's not like a denominational food, you know what I'm saying? Like coffee is a very, like, everybody drinks coffee. We had smoothies, coffee, and waffles. And then at the end, we had tacos. We fucking abandoned the waffle shop. I'm never making another waffle as long as I live.
Oh my God. And I always wanted to try one, so I guess I won't get the chance.
Never, bro. Forever. But we closed the waffle shop down and we started a taco stand, which fucking slayed. Because obviously, I don't know. I think the waffles on a stick were just like too phallic, you know what I mean? Or something like that. Like it was just too fucking gay for like, like some construction dude to roll up, in the morning before work or afterwards or something like that. But the fucking tacos I'm out there grilling meat, dude. It's like heartland of America, dude, just quenching the meat thirst. You know what I'm
Right.
saying?
Right.
So
Right.
tacos went really good, and people were much nicer about the tacos. You know, I thought we were going to deal with. Here's an interesting anecdote, people wise. I thought we were going to deal with at least some racism,
Mhm.
because my partner is full Mexican. She's 100% Mexican. They're tacos. You know what I'm saying? There's no fucking Mexican food, especially authentic Mexican food, anywhere around there.
Imagine, yeah.
And yeah, there's one place in town, but it's rough. You know what I'm saying? It's sin sabor. There's no flavor. And I mean, I think almost every day for the first like month of doing the taco shop, I was totally prepared for somebody to have some kind of Trumpy thing to say, or something about Mexicans, or something about Mexican food, even offhand, you know, even like off
Mhm.
the cuff. Never happened. Never once, man. Not a single thing. Not even like grandma racism where they don't even know they're being racist. It was just like, no, people were just super appreciative. The food was really good, so you know.
So let me ask a question about that.
Yes, please
I
stop
grew
me.
up, in Washington State, small towns, Washington State. I never sensed any racism there, like any like real racism. It would have shocked and horrified me, you know.
Right.
Not that I lived in a crazy diverse town, obviously not. It's like logging towns, so it's pretty
Right.
pretty white, but there was just little teeny bits of diversity, and everyone was so chill with each other. It literally was
Right.
like as if literally there was no such thing as racism in these communities that I lived in. Unless I was young, so maybe I was just completely oblivious. I don't think so, because I would have been shocked and horrified by someone being judged
Was there
just by their
was
skin.
there was there racism in in culture at the time? Was it like, I mean, obviously there's always racism in culture, but what I mean is explicitly over the last 10 years there's been a lot of like dog whistling, in the media that I think that we've been able to see. You know what
You
I'm saying?
know, probably so. This was just me, being young and just like embracing the whole Martin Luther King thing of, don't
Right.
judge someone by the color of their skin, the content of their character. That like I was just like fed that at a young age, and
Mm-hmm.
here's the thing. That's a simple concept. Even a child can understand that, right? I think that you
100%.
have to come from a place where there's ingrained culture that subverts that you kind of like don't get that and have to wrap your mind around it or
Mm-hmm.
something. This is
Mm-hmm.
kind of my
Mm-hmm.
question to you. Just taking that let's just say that my experience was authentic and I wasn't totally missing much.
Sure.
My premise is that I think that a lot of like West Coast towns, even small, very red towns, really aren't that racist in the way that you would in like the deep South. Like get some
Mm.
tiki torch, white
Mm-hmm.
separatist type racism happening. I know that Montana is a little bit of its own thing,
Sure.
but like are there like enclaves of racism there? I know for a fact there is in Idaho. Idaho is like kind of famous for having like a white separatist, groups. But Montana, like, is it more like Washington, more like the West Coast thing, or do you think that it has like a dark place?
I never experienced anything, and I was constantly on guard for it. I would have picked it up if I would have smelled. I'm like a shark to that shit, dude. Like I would have smelled that blood from a ways back. A couple times somebody will say something where you're like, why don't you pedal that back? But they're not. There's definitely no current of like overt anything really. I mean, it's pretty libertarian flavored out
Yeah.
there. So I think it's pretty live and let live. But then again, look, here's the thing I was kind of ruminating on as you're saying this is like, I think it may be hard to construct racist narratives if you don't live near any black people. You know what I'm saying? If there's like one black person in your town, or one gay dude in your town, or 4 Mexicans in your town, you know what I'm saying? Like, it's like you're only around, maybe if you catch it from the media, but then it would be hard to give yourself, like, to select examples from your experience to prove that. Whereas like if you're in a place like Atlanta or something like that, like it's no racial culture is a monolith. There's assholes and there's cool people
Oh
and
yeah, totally.
there's wild people and there's chill people, there's disrespectful, et cetera, et cetera. And so it's like if you were prone to being racist, you could find any example from any group and be like, see, that's exactly how they are. But
You're
in Montana,
totally
it's like,
totally right.
yeah, in Montana, there's one black dude in the town, and he's cool as fuck.
Can I tell you this is totally tangential, but I
Yeah,
just saw
yeah.
this today. So there's a Bay Area company that's coming out with a program or is funding for it or something. I don't think it's available yet. That will, what you call it, like any sort of a call center, like Verizon or anybody.
Uh-huh.
You get somebody all the way across the world, and they don't speak like the world's greatest English. Which
Sure.
why would they? It's like their second or third language. They're like this program supposedly is going to make it so that they sound like a white American.
Really?
And clearly this is like problematic, at its core. But my first thought was, okay,
That's funny.
my father-in-law ends up on these call center calls all the time just because he's old school, doesn't know how to use email, so he'll call all the time for any issue. And every time he gets off the phone, he always like either mocks or says something degrading about the person who, and I didn't understand her and blah blah blah, and will like mock her voice, and it's like it is literally the only consistent racism or whatever you want to call that I experience on a day-to-day basis.
Right.
And I'm just kind of thinking like, if this were the thank God I won't have to deal with him like being like an asshole or a racist like every time he gets off the phone. I don't know. What are your thoughts on that?
She said her name was Sally from Alabama, but she was from Kuala Lumpur.
Yeah, exactly. What do you think about that? Is that something that you're comfortable with, or?
Yeah, I think that's fine. I mean, at the end of the day, like, it would be nice. I don't know. That's such a complicated can of worms to open because, like, you should, if you're an American company, you should pay Americans good wages to do the jobs for your company. Like,
that's
that
the hard issue, right?
That should be like the law. You know what I'm saying?
That's the hard issue. Yeah.
Yeah, you shouldn't be hiring people. But then again, you look at like the flip side to that is like, these people are making money. And they're probably in a place where making money is pretty tough, and getting them that money is probably pretty important. And
some of those jobs, they're probably not too bad, other than being yelled at by, boomer white dudes. I don't know.
In comparison to the manual labor jobs or the hustling jobs that are available in some of these places, like, yeah, I think listening to angry white people was probably like pretty chill. You know what I'm saying? Changing their voices to make them sound like white Americans. I mean, I feel like God.
It's like an evil genius move or something, right?
It kind of is, but then I feel like it's like I wish I could think of a sharp analogy for this, but it feels like I don't know, the guy that made like the sickest horse carriage right before the car came out.
Oh,
It's just
oh my God, right.
This horse carriage is fucking tricked out. We're going to sell 1 million of these fucking things. Then the car comes out like 2 years later. He's like, fuck.
Oh, that's so funny.
I'm like, damn fool. Like, AI is like 5 years away from fucking just being intelligent enough to field like old white people questions, dude.
No, like right now you can be on the phone with an AI and not even know it sometimes. I've had that experience before. Man. Like, is this a person or not? Sometimes you just don't know, Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
Funny. Well, sorry, back to Montana.
Yeah.
I want to jump into a little bit of the so you have told me before, and this is interesting to me, I think you said this on this podcast, that when you talk to someone who's like just a mega Trumper or just mega hard right out there, one of the interesting things is that they just don't ever see any negative news about Trump. It's not like they ignore it or they argue against it. They just are oblivious to it, right?
Totally.
Tell me a little bit about that, because that to me is kind of fascinating.
Oh man, it's so crazy. The first time because living in California, it's nuts, right? Like Trump is Satan. You know what I'm saying? Like Trump is Baphomet. You know what I mean? Yeah. When you live in California, and you never hear anything good about him, and so you get enraged. You know what I'm saying? And let me preface this by saying I fucking hate that guy.
Oh, me
But
too. I know.
I fucking hate that guy.
I will say
But
nice things about him, though. I give myself a teeny bit of credit every now and
see,
then,
that's what
and
I'm
every now and then
saying.
he's genuinely fucking funny, which I appreciate. But aside from
Oh,
that, I loathe him. He should never be anywhere near anything remotely like a public office. But
you
yes.
gotta watch. Just side note, you gotta watch the Shane Gillis bit on Trump at the first debate, calling Ted Cruz's wife a dog. he was like, we weren't ready for debate at that level. Like everybody's like,
Nope.
I'm Jeff Jeffries and I stand for religion. And Trump's like, you're a fag, and your wife looks like a dog. You got a dog wife.
Yeah, we weren't
Oh
ready for that.
man,
Oh my God, and
we
the
weren't
news
ready.
was so stoked to report on all of that,
Oh
right?
man, but yeah, so that was the thing that I noticed, right? So I went, so I'm here, I'm riled up, I'm like, oh fuck this guy, and it's like this hatred that can only be built on like a character, because if you can't hate a person that much, you can hate a character that much, but like the broiling hatred that you feel when somebody is caricaturized, you can hate them so much because the things that are prominent about them stick out so much. But
Mhm.
then I went to Montana for the first time and I heard people, and I wish I could bring out specific examples because obviously they're scant. But there was just stuff where I was noticing, I watched the news and they'd be like, yeah, Trump did this cool thing today. And I'm like, are you sure? And I'd look it up and be like, it'd be like, oh no, that was chill. Like that there
Mhm.
wasn't anything particularly evil about that. And it's like you got to figure in 4 years of being president, if you just don't even actually have the ability to do evil things all day every day. You got to
Yeah.
like you have to administrate the country in a certain way and keep certain things rolling. And like yeah, he's done a ton of evil stuff, but what I noticed is that they're both it's a crazy bubble in California where you just hear that this dude is fucking the Antichrist. And so you hate him so much.
Mhm.
But in a weird way, I don't think you do. I think you just hate the idea of him. And it doesn't give you a wholeness of disliking the person because you don't actually know who they are. You don't know anything good about them. And in the same sense, you go to Montana and the news cycle there is so obsessed with making him look not like good, and downplaying the stuff or not even talking about the stuff that he's fucking up. Like those people are like, they don't hear. I mean, in California, like, how could you not fucking hate this guy? And you
Mhm.
go there and you're like, oh, you didn't hear about any of this stuff. And if you bring it up, people will be like, nah, that's not real. And I'm like, nah, that's real. Like that fucking happened, bro. You know what I mean?
Yeah, there's like media diet and also media literacy because
Big
sometimes,
time.
the media diet is just consuming content that skews the narrative so hard, and media
Mm-hmm.
literacy is not being able to like see bullshit where
Right.
bullshit exists, and it's all over
Right.
the entire political spectrum.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of ideally, everyone would just consume more content and
Mm-hmm.
just every year do a refresher course on media literacy, right? I feel like you have to work at it. It's not like this is kind of a problem, but it's also I get it because everyone's like this. Uh, Media, like consuming media, including like political media, it's entertainment. It's just like the thing that you
Mm-hmm.
do. I watch YouTube videos while I eat lunch these days as I work from home. And
Mm-hmm.
that's just like my media diet. And I'll just like click on videos as they come up. That sort of a thing. It's entertainment. And maybe I will watch videos that will like radicalize me in some way or another, or like really skew my view of a specific topic. I wasn't seeking to be radicalized or to have a crazy narrative on a view. I was just like sitting there eating my lunch, trying to be entertained for 30 minutes
Mm-hmm.
before I go back to work. You know what I mean? And I do think
Mm-hmm.
that that's everybody. And, there's a lot to be said about this. I think that it's interesting that CNN and a couple of other places like that are trying to do this pivot where they're like really trying hard to say we're not just going to speak to a liberal audience, we want to speak to all
Mm-hmm.
people. I think that that's like a step in the right direction. I don't think it's going to
Mm-hmm.
work. But like I do just like imagine a world where people took it upon themselves to realize that yeah, this is entertainment, but you should do a little bit of work yourself to like expand your media diet and have a little like media literacy training. That's the only way that we can ever improve this. I think like one last thought is like right now we're in the middle of the Russia-Ukraine crisis, like we talked about the other week. Right. I mean, like think about how good we have it here. In Russia, it is so hard to really get any news about what's really happening in Ukraine and what the world really thinks of this war, because like there's a whole entire political world that's like trying to like shelter you from the truth. In America, oh my God, that doesn't exist. The truth is not being sheltered from you, at least like not real actively by the government, like you can find the truth by a couple of different
just being inundated.
And it's just like, just try just a teeny bit, because it like quote unquote the truth or like other narratives, let's just say, it are there. Imagine if we were just being fed one narrative and how awful that would be. Well, that's not the case. So I think that we should try a little bit harder. So it like grand scheme, I know that we kind of like want to not judge the people in Montana or wherever about like having this view of Trump that I think is kind of divorced from reality. But like, I do think it's a little bit just a sad story. It's just it is sad that there is so much media out there, some of which is good, some of which is bad, but to only get one channel of it is sad, I think.
Yeah, man. I mean, I think one of the biggest, I've talked about this before, is I think one of the biggest factors in that is that people that are in the boomer generation or even the Gen X generation are coming from a time where media was extremely filtered and you didn't really have very many places to go. You were a hamster in a cage with a little fucking little bottle. You know what I'm saying? And that's how they're used to getting it. They're used to getting it from their friends and from a newspaper and from a TV channel. Maybe 2 or 3. And I think that to try to get somebody, I mean, you have to be committed as like a project in your life. If you didn't grow up with like a diversity of media sources, you have to take it as a project upon yourself to educate yourself on how to sift through 25 different media sources to find what looks to be true. And then even then you have to be kind of like an educated person, because you have to have a mind for doing research in a methodical or at least a semi-scholastic way. Like you don't have to, but it helps so much, man. And there's a huge percentage of the country that they never made it out of high school, man. Yeah. A lot of rural America is not college educated, and that doesn't mean they're not smart, but it does mean that it's going to be more challenging for them to develop media literacy, because media literacy has a scholastic kind of approach to it, where you have to be able to do research and you have to kind of have a sense for what is being reinforced over and over again and where it's coming from. You know what I mean? Stuff like that. And that's not intuitive. It's not an intuitive thing. The intuitive thing for anybody that's over 40 is to turn on a channel and be like, does this feel true to me or not? But the problem is,
and it's made to feel true to them. They make it.
That's exactly what I'm saying. Is that like maybe 30 or 40 years ago, it was, maybe a station would have a small group of people get together and be like, hey, how do we present this news to try to strike a certain audience? Now you've got scientists. This is a McDonald's cheeseburger, man. You know what I mean? This is genetically engineered news that is built molecule by molecule to incite and activate the pathways that are going to make it penetrate you. You know what I mean? And so it's just a totally different animal, especially if you're watching news on television, man. And
I'm kind of curious, because of that, again, in Montana, rural America, what are some of the issues that these people care about? I think that good question. I mean, This is one interesting thing I heard today was that, talking about immigration, Republicans say that America is full, and Democrats say that cities are full. This is kind of like a funny divide that exists.
Right.
You know, there's a lot of complicated issues out there. My assessment is that immigration and goofy things like gas prices and maybe abortion and crime, a couple of things like that are probably high on the list of Republicans.
Mhm.
What's kind of like your experience of issues that people care about? Maybe gun rights. Did that come up at all when
Yeah.
you were living
Yeah,
up there?
gun rights comes up a lot. I mean,
Okay.
because one of the things that like the stereotypical Californian that moves to Montana, one of the reasons why they're despised is because they have weird views on. I mean, weird for me, but like it is weird to go from California, a place where it's difficult to get a gun and there's a lot of police,
Mhm.
to a place where it's very easy to get a gun. People do it for fun and there's not a lot of police. You know
Mhm.
what I mean? And I mean, and there's a lot of hunting and such. But people come from California with liberal gun views, like, well, why does everybody out here need guns? I'm like, why are you asking that question? You just moved to Montana, like move to a liberal rural place. They exist. You know what I'm saying? You can find that, but like, don't go there and be like, well, where I'm from. I'm like, well, nobody gives a fuck where you're from, dude. You know what I mean? Like, and that's a huge issue out there that Montana specifically is dealing with, probably because of that show Yellowstone, where like
Mhm.
hella people fucking saw that show and were like, oh my god, it's so beautiful out there, honey, and it's just seems so, the people are so rugged and individualistic. You know what I mean? And like everybody wanted to move out there, but people get frustrated in Montana with people coming from the outside with a non-integrationist attitude, where they want the same thing that they had where they're from and they want it there too. And that
Mhm.
extends to all kinds of shit like gun rights. It extends to developments and amenities. I mean, look, dude, there's a Facebook group in Ennis. It's called Ask Ennis, right? And people post on it every day, all the time. It's like the way that everybody communicates there,
Mhm.
seriously. And a couple times, man, somebody from somewhere else will post something in a good meaning way that would totally fly in a city and just get flamed, bro. I'm
Whoa.
talking like 100 comments deep of people being like, fuck you, go back to where you came from. And
Oh,
a good
Jesus.
example is this. So there's a little beach at the lake, little teeny tiny beach at the lake in Ennis. There's a big lake, small beach. Everybody knows where it is. Everybody's been going to that little beach forever. This lady comes from probably California or somewhere where the beaches are fucking nice, you know what I'm saying? And she's like, yeah, I just noticed that the beach is kind of crummy, and like she's kind of like I'm like, I'm reading it and I'm just like, oh my god, what are the comments gonna be like? She's like, yeah, the beach is kind of crummy and like there's not a lot of sand. And she's like, and I'm wondering, if can we organize like a cleanup day once a month and then maybe like truck in some like fresh sand. And I'm like, I get it. You know what I'm saying?
Totally.
It's actually a good
A cleanup
natured
day sounds
thing.
like a great idea,
Oh
frankly.
yeah, man, right? Like cleanup day and like, oh dude, fresh sand on the beach. Like who doesn't like fresh sand on the beach? The problem is, how does that read, right? So everybody in the comments is like, my kids have been going there to that same beach for 25 years, never had a complaint, and if you want to go, if you want to change the way this place is, then go back somewhere else. And that is like the energy there where people are like, let's go back to this rural urban divide situation. People fucking move to the country because they want the American life the way that it was sold to Americans for the last 100 years. That it doesn't actually exist, but they think it does, and they want it to. You know what I mean? They want to be in a small community where people know and trust each other. They want to be in a place that doesn't change very fast. If
Right.
you want to get down to like the real crux of the urban rural divide, I think that might be one of the things that is like at the nucleus of that of the tension where it's like people in cities are like, things change every day, man. The
Yeah.
longest cycle that you experience is rent, 30
Right.
days. You know, rent is the longest like actual cycle. Everything else cycles by the day, by the hour, by the week. You know, nothing cycles in a yearly way in a city. Get out to the country, you know, things grow, things die. You're in a different environment. The cycles lengthen. You know, you're looking at a couple of years to develop a piece of property, maybe 5-10 years to get, you know, a house built and to get a property with a well that has a little farm on it and stuff. People are thinking at different time scales. The problem is the world is not moving like that. It doesn't matter where you live. The world's moving fast, brother.
Yeah, I think that you hit it right on, like, nail on the head, which is that, I mean, living in the country is a lifestyle. And in a sense, I think this is true. It's more of a fragile lifestyle than living in a city. Because again, in a city, like, I feel that, like, chaos is totally baked in. A little bit of chaos, totally baked in. Whereas I think in the country, any element of chaos is
very destabilizing.
Very destabilizing, and it's kind of like earth shaking to because I mean, you know, I lived in this little town, Montesano, Washington, for a number of years when I was a child, and the people for generations were going to the same church, hunting in the same forests, fishing the same creeks. And you know, literally, it goes back for, you know, decades and decades and decades, and people expect that their children will also have those same experiences.
Right.
Nobody in a city has that mentality. Everyone is kind of like a little transient. Even if you like own a home in a city, I think that you still then you're like an urbanist and a globalist, and you're like, maybe I'll ditch this place for New York someday. You know what I mean? There's a little bit of that. And I think that, like, you feel a sense of ownership in your community as a collective rather than like, this is my slice of America, rah, you know? I think that, like, that literally encapsulates it. And for better or worse, that is, I think, why when you go to a small town, you feel like you're going back to the past to some degree. And I think that it's going to be interesting, you know, technology and just a lot of things in culture are speeding up right now, as they have been since, like, the advent of the internet. And, like, I think that divide is only going to become more and more pronounced as, you know, technology goes forward. And I think that, like, this is just one last note, you know, about this, is that I do think that a lot of that country living stuff, there's a reason why it's stable, because it's basic, you know. And I think that's like, it doesn't need to change in a sense. Do you know what I mean? I think that it does kind of, like, the negative side is it does hold back the rest of the country politically, you know. But, like, you don't have to own an iPhone, you know. You don't have to have an email address. You don't have to, you know. And your life is still totally meaningful and wonderful and rich on, you know, by reading Dostoevsky and Shakespeare, you have a good life, you know, or whatever, you know, whatever the equivalent of that is. Hunting and having a great garden in your backyard, great life. But the thing is that, you know, we're going to be doing different shit as people. And that different shit is going to shape our priorities and shape our global standing, you know, as a country versus other countries. I don't know. There's a lot going on there, but as a liberal in a city, I don't have an agenda to disrupt the lifestyle in a country, town. That's what I'm saying. You know what I mean? I don't have an agenda to actively disrupt that. Even if I were to move to that town, I would be that person commenting shit that would make people angry. That would not be my intention, you know?
Yeah, man. No, I think that you nailed into something too that is something I kind of wanted to at least touch on, which is that, you know, I think that what you're saying with the idea that life should be simple, it should be able to stay simple, and you don't need an iPhone or an email address, that's what people think. But they're being confronted with the reality that they do fucking need an email address and they do fucking need an iPhone, because there's all kinds of things that you don't get to experience if you don't have those things. And no matter how much you love ranching cattle, when you watch all the other kids playing with Pokemon cards, eventually you're going to want a couple Pokemon cards, man. Like, it's just really hard to convince yourself that you're happy with simplicity when everything is becoming more complex and people seem very interested in it. And I think that that's one of the fundamental tensions that's happening in country life right now, where people are they're in this contact zone between being like, things need to stay the same. I'd like to just be in a mostly white, mostly straight community. I'd like to feel safe in that. I'd like to be able to fucking call somebody a tranny every once in a while and not get fucking canceled or whatever the fuck, you know what I mean? Just live an old school style of life where I'm not super accountable to the world at large. I'm more accountable to the people in my social circle. But that reality is shrinking and disappearing, like, as we speak, man. Like, every second that passes, you're more socially accountable to the whole than you are to any small group of people, unless you live in a town of like 50 people. You know what I'm saying? And I think that I
guess even in a town of 50 people, if you want to stay connected to your children, you do need that iPhone, because your kids are going to be like, I can't talk to you if you don't have an email address and an iPhone where I can text you. You know, like, I literally can't talk. I'm never going to see you.
Yeah, man. But I think that what's happening too is that the Republican narrative is capitalizing on that fear, where people are in a corner. They're being backed into a corner in a certain way, where they're like, well, I want to hold on to this style of living. And the world is like, yeah, man, you can't. You actually can't. Like, you can try, but then you'll be kind of on the outside of everything. Whereas people 50 years ago that were living a rural lifestyle, I think they felt integral. I think they felt integral to the fabric of American society. And I think now they're starting to feel exiled from American society if they want to hold on to more simplistic ways of being. And there's a fear. This is one of the, I don't know how much time you have today, but this is something that I do feel really compelled to speak on, is that there is a fearfulness in the country that there also is in a city. They just come in different flavors. But there's a fearfulness there that comes in a very specific flavor, and it's the fear of change. And I think that for many, many years, people were able to live in a small place and be like, but it's not really changing here. And in a place like Ennis, it's changing fast. It's really changing hard, and it's changing fast. And the people who came there to live a more static, more simple version of life are becoming terrified. And you can see it in their faces. You can feel it in their energy. And it's not.
Is that real, or is that just like a narrative they're embodying from Fox News? You know?
It's real. No, it's totally real. I mean, house prices have gone up $250,000, $300,000 in the last 3 years.
That's crazy.
Home prices have doubled in 3 years.
That makes no sense. I mean, that's crazy. Out there?
Yeah, it's a little bit of a bubble, Montana.
Yeah.
People are moving there more than like Tennessee, you know what I mean, or Arkansas, or some other like rural place or something like that. You know, it's romanticized in the culture right now. But yeah, I mean, there's a fearfulness that's being capitalized on by news media that is real and does exist. And part of it does have to do with like trans people, and being like, I don't get it. And it's like, yeah, you don't actually have that luxury anymore. Like, I get that you don't fucking want to get it. You don't want to stretch your mind around like, alternate genders, or it's like, but you're going to, if that's as far as you can stretch your fucking brain, you're fucked in 20 years, man. Wait till the next thing comes out. You know what I'm saying? Like, there's just a lot of stuff that's impinging upon people's desire to remain static, where they're being expected to be aware of the fucking diverse states of human existence that you used to be able to go to a small town to escape. I don't really want to know how black people live. I don't really give a fuck about gay people or trans people. I don't feel like I should have to be aware of these people, so I'm going to go to a place where they don't exist for me. And
so
it's
I
like,
do
even
think
in a small town they do now.
I do think, having grown up in a small town, I think it's a little unfair to say people move to those towns to have that experience. I think that like people like the lifestyle of the small town, and so they end up there.
Yeah, that's
And
fair, yeah.
you get a job there, and maybe then you go to church and you just kind of like start getting just, the anti-progressive narratives kind of like in your vocabulary, let's say. But yeah, I mean, my family certainly didn't move to like small towns because we wanted to get away from something. My parents were from Portland,
Sure.
and my dad just got a job, in Aberdeen, Washington.
Oh, yeah, okay.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
That's I think for a lot of people that's how it goes, and that's who's there. In all of these small towns, at one point, you don't have to go back that far really. There was an industry, and it was like the most ambitious
true,
people
yeah.
who were populating these places because like this is where the coal mining job was. This is where the forestry job was. This, I mean, this is where the cannery was, and these were like the young men who were like out to strike it rich. They weren't like the dumbbell hicks, of the world. They were like the go-getters. And there's a lot of lore about this up in the Northwest about all the early loggers, because they were like the ultra badasses. It's one of the like most dangerous jobs that's ever existed, and they were like badasses, right? Felling, the biggest trees in the world and all this type of thing, and like dying all the time.
Eco monsters.
It's been, let's just say this narrative is all correct. It started with that. That's how these small towns began. And they've had this like weird, this is a lot of places in America, but they had this like weird 50 to 100 year kind of like bliss where everyone got a cheap home, like everybody, like a cheap home that was big, and everybody you expected that. You had your 2 or 3 car garage. You had your 2 or 3 kids. You went to the same church. That like ingrained itself. But like, I don't think that we're equivalent necessarily to a small town in the UK that's been there for 800 years. You know what I mean? Our small town culture is odd a little bit. It's very weird. It pretends like it's been there forever, but it totally hasn't.
Well, and I think technology might have destroyed a lot of that too, because it's like one of the things I noticed that it's like, you used to live in a small town and there wasn't very many ways to be entertained. You had to go to the movie theater, the one movie theater. You had to go to the one play. You had to go to the rodeo to even be entertained at all. And now,
just to throw it out there, like a lot of the entertainment in my town was like high school theater. You know what I mean? There was no like community, like high school events.
High school sports.
High school football games were huge. High school.
And now you don't actually need that to be entertained. You can stay at home on your phone or on your TV.
Yeah.
And I think that's another part of it that makes that is encouraging a fearfulness in a small town like Ennis, is that there isn't actually any responsibility to be social anymore. You know what I mean?
Oh, damn, that's interesting. Yeah. Because we talk about that in terms of like millennials in cities, but you're right. I didn't think about that in terms of like a small town community.
Oh, old people are on the fucking media just as hard as anybody. You know what I mean? Like, they're not actually out, like, walking around, chatting with people, fucking shit. Maybe sometimes, but they're also on Facebook. They're also watching a lot of television, and they're also staying home a lot, too. But, at the end of the day, I think that there's just, you're probably right. I mean, I think maybe I was a little hasty in constructing a narrative that this is why people go to those places. I think you're right. I think people probably are in these places and fall into certain patterns that are just kind of naturalistic to the environment around them. But I do see there's a heightened anxiety whenever I go to a small place now, where it feels like they're very aware that the American dream that they've been either sold, pursuing, or bought is changing pretty rapidly. You know what I mean? That $200,000 that they saved for retirement probably isn't going to last 30 years.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? And for people like me, younger people, we're like, well, shit, bro, I'll fucking probably hustle to the day I die. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, there is no fucking golden parachute for me. And I kind of know that, unless I fucking get rich somehow.
Yeah, we've always been told there's no retirement for our generation. I remember being very young being told that.
Pension, you know what I mean? And for us, it's a given. But I think for most people over 40, they're like, damn, this is the crumbling of a real slice of what I signed up for,
Last question.
Sure.
So everything I've read recently is that, the divide in America, especially like the urban-rural divide, is kind of a lot of times how this is or can be couched. Worse than ever, what do you think is going to happen in the next, near future, 5 or 10 years or longer? What do you like? Play this out a little bit as you see it. Do you think that this is going to, like, as they say, tear America apart? Is there going to be like some sort of an uprising of like the small town people with 50 million guns apiece, and their kids have 20 million guns apiece? Are they gonna, like, is this going to cause any sort of chaos, or is this just going to like kind of mellow out? This is just like how this is the new normal of like, yeah, there's an urban rural divide and it's super tense, but like we just yell at each other on Facebook. What do you think is going to happen?
Bro, it depends greatly on our politicians. It depends greatly on our I think, because you could get somebody that's a demagogue like Trump, who gets people really fired up. And I think people, one of the biggest reasons that he resonated with people in the country is because he spoke plainly. He spoke plainly, and it didn't matter what he was saying. People were like, I can understand it. I don't need to stretch myself to understand I get this guy. And I don't think you can say that with Obama. I don't think you can say that with any politician that we've had. I think most of the Republican politicians we've had in the last 20 years, George Bush Jr., you know what I mean? Like, he was like, you got him. He spoke plainly.
He did, yeah.
And so if we can see more Democratic politicians and more politicians in general understanding that it's not an issues game, that it's a fucking linguistics game, that all you need to do in order to get these people to be on your team and to understand you is to speak plainly to them and not be covering your tracks every time you speak to give yourself an out or whatever, or be overly academic in the way that you approach people in the country. I think one of the big reasons we see people so angry and getting into nationalist politics and stuff like that is because Democrats really have a problem with being verbose about what they're trying to say to people. It's not direct, effective message.
Have you seen those speeches by Kamala Harris lately, where she's nonstop mocked online? It's all over Twitter. It was yesterday, and it is occasionally where. Yeah, there's that too. Where she will like be talking, but she will say like 3 minutes of utter like nothing but buzzwords, and it makes no sense. And it's like all you have to do is, one, not say any of that, and then two, just get to the point and say something.
Dude, you just gotta be.
It's so goddamn simple, and like she's the worst I've ever seen. The worst any politician ever. I don't understand it. And she used to be like an okay senator. Is so bizarre to me. Like she would. I don't know. She resonated when she was a senator and talking and stuff like that. God, not in her current role.
I mean, Biden's doing an okay job of it, right?
Dude, like Biden's doing the plain speak thing, and he's
just old as fuck. I don't think he has the ability to compose like fucking crazy. You know what I mean? Like maybe he does. I'm maybe being an asshole, but he's chill. He's chill. He's just like an old guy. He's just trying to fucking.
Dude, that's why he won. I'd say, in large part, I think that it's his style of speaking. I think completely to your point.
Me too, man. So I think if you play this out 10 years and then we get a bunch of firebrand people who are good and who understand the culture of rural America to be a place where if you speak simply and directly, they'll fucking get on board with what you're saying because nobody else is. If the whole political landscape changes where people are more accepting, I like Pete Buttigieg. He's a straight shooter. He'll be like, nah, fuck you. I mean? Like that's what Democrats need. Democrats need Trumps. We need people that'll show up and be like, nah, fuck you. Your opinion is bullshit, fool, and you know it. Instead of being like, well, if you take a look at the issue and the statistics, and it's like nobody gives a fuck, dude. Nobody actually cares about that shit anymore, except for people who are already on your side. So if everything changes and people are more able to speak to rural America in language that they can, I don't want to say understand, because they understand everything just fine, but language that they vibe with, then I think
that resonates with them. Yeah,
that resonates. Then we come back to where we were maybe 25 years ago, where there's political discourse on both sides that seems pretty reasonable. There's people at the extreme edges, but for the most part, people are talking about the same things in the same language. If we continue to have people that are just outlandish Republicans, but they speak simply, and just obviously outlandish Democrats too, but they can't manage to get their message straight, we're going to have a real fucking problem, dude. We're going to have a real fucking problem.
Yeah, I think you're completely right about the politicians. I would only just add, the note of political pundits to, the Tucker Carlsons or whoever.
Bro.
A lot of those guys, if they really wanted to, they could stir up a mob tonight,
100%.
Get your guns and go to X spot and we're having a rally and blah, 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 blah. And the liberal Democrats are taking away your freedoms. It's like a couple of sentences like that out of the wrong person's mouth could really set things over an edge. I don't know. Yeah.
Fucking people be going away for 10, 15 years for going to that fucking riot, dude.
Yeah.
I've been seeing people get locked up, brother.
Dude, well, just on Twitter yesterday.
It's about fucking rolling out to the Capitol again. You know what I'm saying?
Well, yesterday on Twitter, I was having a little bit of a back and forth with a guy who was saying that Biden is the real fascist because, and he had this like little list of reasons, like he's raiding his political opponents and he is locking up anyone who protests. It's like, okay, he's like, not even him, it's the Justice Department, but like raiding his political, okay, like the FBI was taking stolen top secret documents from Trump's house, and like the protesters were trying to stop forcefully the transfer of power, like in a democracy, like capital sin, I don't know, but like to frame it like that to me was just kind of like, oh, yep, you are one of those people who lives in a completely alternate reality. You're probably completely unreachable. And thanks a lot, Tucker Carlson and everybody else who like fed you this bizarre ass narrative. Not that I have all my narratives right. I'm sure I completely don't, but I mean, goddamn.
Totally. Let me say this last piece, man. The only thing. Thank you so much for letting me take the steering wheel on this one, because I have a lot of opinions about this stuff. Let me say this. I said this on one of our past podcasts, but I think it bears repeating. The biggest problem between people in cities and people in the country is the same problem, the same exact problem. They think they understand how the other side of people need to govern and live. And they're totally different. They're totally different. People in cities think that people in the country don't need guns, and they need this, and they don't need this, and they don't need this. And that's why people are hated when they come to the countryside from a city, because they take that shit with them. Meanwhile, people in the country think that they understand how homelessness works in cities. They're pissed off about Black Lives Matter protests. Meanwhile, there's one black person in town. You know what I'm saying? And there has to be the middle ground that actually heals people up is cultural relativism on both sides. And liberals think they've got that licked. They're like, nah.
They don't, though. Yeah.
No, I understand.
They don't understand small town people.
Now, I understand, I get this, except for those fucking hick Republicans. I'm like, no, fuck that, bro. You need to understand that until you live in a place, you have no idea what those people need, how they need to run their city, or how they need to live their daily life. And the same goes for both sides. It's the exact same problem. And it makes so much of the anger and the animosity between the two. If people in cities were like, hey, man, we don't need guns here because there's enough of them. And we have a gun violence problem, but you know what? That's just where we're at. We don't actually need to understand how you live. We just need to have some respect for it. And then if shit gets out of hand, I mean, if like a white nationalist militia forms or something, obviously we need to go fucking talk about that. And on the other side, it's like, Fox News, man, stop talking about the homelessness epidemic in San Francisco. I was there today. It looks like it did 15 years ago. It's not that much different, man. It's just it's a rugged city with a good climate where there's a lot of social services. You don't have any fucking idea what San Francisco needs to do to change their shit. You know what I mean? You got to peel back a little bit. And
I got some ideas.
People doing their own thing. Well, me too, bro. I live here.
Because let's not say it's not a problem. I think the Fox News's perspective on it is hilarious and dumb, but oh my God, like it's not like San Francisco is doing itself any favors here.
No, it's insane. I mean, look, San Francisco, the whole like defund the police movement, like this is where my fucking Republican side kicks in. I'm like, y'all are paying the price for that shit right now, man. Like the cops are like, oh, you guys don't need us? All right, well, we'll just only deal with like fucking serious crimes and just kind of when we feel like it. Same thing in Oakland right now. You know, they're like, theft, I don't know, didn't seem like you guys really needed police that bad, so maybe you can your insurance will handle it. And it's like, it's wild, bro. It's fucking wild to have a reduced police presence. Like, liberal people are fucking insane. Like for that shit. I'm like, you have to reform the way that people are policing. You have to reform the police force, and like you can't let people just do crazy shit and get away with it. But you also need a ton of police because people are fucking wild, dude.
Yeah, it's a certain demographic of the public will rain chaos on the rest of us if they're allowed to. Like, that's just
dude. Just wait in line for the Bay Bridge one time and see how many people almost fucking kill you with their cars, man. Cops.
All right. Shit, hey, brother. Thanks, Devon. Good talks, and let's talk again soon.
Sounds good, buddy.